I'd like to keep this particular session a bit interactive, and I'll just get down because each of you are handling a very crucial function at your organization, which is cybersecurity, right? It's something which is supposed to be a shared responsibility. Everyone says that, but at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, it's the security team or the ISG function that's blamed. I'd like to understand from few of you, what are the challenges that you have faced or are facing over the period of time that you have spent on this particular space? So I'll just get down and ask anyone, any particular person who is at present facing any particular issues. Can we start with you, sir?
I'm from fraud monitoring team, and the major common problem what we come across is the unwanted apps are getting downloaded, and some few people get the call that we are from RTO or we are from MSCB, so you have to download this app to make the payment. So this is one of the major threat what we have come across, and that was the only reason why I asked that specific question, that whether we have any mitigants to that.
Okay. Are there solutions to prevent? Yes, I guess, right? What's the problem in implementing it, is my question.
Solution is definitely awareness that company will not ask you to download some unwanted apps. They will not ask for OTPs. They will not ask for your credit cards, CVV numbers, or your debit card CVV numbers. But that awareness needs to be implanted among the customers and the users. So,
great. Thank you, sir. Let's move on to someone else. So if I ask you, what's one of the major problems that you have faced? I'll ask three of you, no problem.
I'll take this call. There is too much of data in the knock and sock. And the second problem which we face generally is a pseudo IT. Correct? I will not give you the solutions for it. I have come here for your solutions.
Sir? Oh, you have spoken for all. Okay. What else? I'll cover this side as well. Sir?
Well, the major problem that we see is that customer awareness thing, which everybody has been talking about. So from our organization perspective, we try to create awareness amongst customers because, as the other gentleman said, no organization asks for credentials of the customers, but sometimes the fraudsters allure the customers and trick the customers to share their information. So we are working on it. We are still a far way off from educating all customers because this is a journey. And I'm sure with the support of everybody in the ecosystem, we'll be able to do it in the short run, or may not be in the short run, medium to long term. Thank you.
Okay. So.
Basically, there will be multiple solutions available from multiple vendors, and there might be some solutions which might be overlapping. So, lot of false positives comes. To monitor all this, there will be definitely challenges. So, looking forward for some kind of simple solutions which gives.
Okay. So that's great. I'll draw some insight from here itself. Okay. So when you look at this, right, everything at the end of the day is leading to somewhat the problems that you are facing. It's leading to somewhat which brings the top line for the company, right? When your customers get affected, it affects the top line. When your customers have problems, your business faces problems. When you have a lot of data, you cannot focus on that particular thing which can drive your business. Now, if I specifically segment this into three things, for each of the problems that we discussed, there are available solutions. If I talk about the OTP thing, and this is a discussion that I had, and I've really seen those solutions, is can this banking ecosystem or the banking infrastructure work without that OTP authentication? The answer is yes. Why are we not implementing it? because there are a lot of problems. We might be moving towards a digital infrastructure, but there are constraints to it as well. But one thing that consolidates to all of these problems is the decision makers in the organizations aligning on the same point. There are major problems that each one of you said. Just one single question. With all the stakeholders that you interact with in your organization, do they align with this? Like, is it a easy convincing topic for you, all of you, with all the people in the organization? Yes, that's one of the major issues which brings a lot of friction on the activities that we want to do. So we're going to talk about something of that sort and what have we done on that, right? This particular session that I'm going to have right now is going to be a fairly bit technical, and I generally take the privilege of having these sessions, especially, and I can say this here, in India, because most of the people that I've interacted have a better understanding than most of the people across the world. So if I can have this screen here. Yep, so we're going to talk about quantified business exposure to risks, right? This particular symbol that I've put, there's a particular reason to it, and I'm not going to reveal it, right? I want it to be a mystery for all of you to find out what exactly is, so that I can have a call to action of having to start an interaction with you guys later on, right? So moving ahead, what is the symbol? Q, right? Quantification starts with Q, but every question at least starts with Q. You go and say, we want to do this, this would cost this. Question that you would get is Q. Q karna hai. And to justify that is a huge task. It's a very tough task. Why is it tough? Because it's very hard to put numbers into anything. If we look at few of the stats on the number of solutions used by organizations, and which was rightly mentioned a few minutes back, you will find there are average 8 different cybersecurity solutions used by organizations. 8 different cybersecurity solutions used by organizations. And this particular stats is just not about enterprises. I'm talking about enterprises to mid-size to startups. If you look at enterprises, they will have around 30, 35 solutions in place. They have adequate teams as well. But even then, only 1/3 of the cyber incidents are identified by the solutions and the people. Now, why is it that? Are the solutions not capable? Are the people not competent? The solutions are doing at best that they can. And yes, we agree that there is a certain level of more maturity that we can expect from the cybersecurity talent that's coming in. But again, they are not so bad as such as well, right? Then what's going wrong? The problem is the endless loop of cybersecurity trust gap that exists amongst the different stakeholders who are involved in this decision making. Now, why does this trust gap exist? Because different people talk different language. Imagine this is a boardroom discussion that's going on. Now, I'm the CISO. I come and tell you, we have got 500 vulnerabilities with 25 unique CVEs with a 7.2 of EPSs with 6.3 of CVSs, right? So in the last panel, we were talking, there was a question of IOCs, right? With relevance and all. Well, if you adapt to EPSs, you will know what has been the impact of that IOC as well, right? So that level of advancement has already been done on the technical sides. So if there is a particular CV that exists, most of the solutions use CVSS till now because
So,
so when you talk about EPSS, it talks about the exploitability rate. A CV might have a severity of 9.2, but there has been no activity on that, on a particular industry specific, on a particular geography specific. You do not actually need to bang your head on that. You can actually focus on things that would matter to you a lot more, right? So 500 vulnerabilities, 25 CVs with is EPSS of 7.2 and a CVSS of 6.3. What would the board understand? Or you go and say in the last quarter we have increased our patch cadence by 25%. We have our MTTAs right now 2 days. Okay, fine. What's next? Has anyone here faced this kind of a conversation? No one? Everyone's board is convinced? Okay. However, I know this particular answer, which won't come out in an open forum, right? But vis-a-vis, the same conversation, you go and say, we've got $5 million of risk. We need to invest $30,000 in specifically this particular departments, this particular areas, and this particular controls, so that that $5 million risk gets down to $72,000. You get everyone's ears in the boardroom. The question is how to do that. And to solve that particular point where there were existing models on risk quantification, we saw that there are a lot of limitations, right? It's not pragmatic. It's not comes with its own touch of human intervention. And when there is a human thing in analyzing a particular aspect of risk quantification, there's subjectivity to it. So if we use those models and if there are 4 people in the organization, 4 people run the same model, you will get 4 different results. That's not how it should be. It should be 100 people running the same thing in the same organization would get the same result. So there are a couple of parameters that we focused on. And it starts with what industry the organization belongs to. What is the market cap of that organization? And what are the different information security solutions that they are using? So I'll give you the importance of all of them, right? Which particular industry? Because APT groups work industry specific. If I talk about APT 32 or APT 64, both of them would work in a different way. The kill chains would be different. When we talk about the market cap is to understand or what can be the potential monetary impacts on that organization. And when we talk about the InfoSec solutions, it essentially helps understand what can be the mitigation efficiency and what each of those InfoSec solutions are doing in terms of a coverage. Like you were mentioning about the overlap. So is there an overlap? Are there shadow ITs? Are there things in my organization which I'm not aware itself, right? These are the first 3 parameters. The next 3 parameters is what are the different line of businesses, because different line of business has different criticalities. Take, for example, I'll take an example of a pharmaceutical industry, right? A pharmaceutical industry having the same firewall in the marketing department vis-a-vis the research and development department having the same vulnerability. It would be more critical in the research and development because that can impact the business a lot more. Next is what are the different locations from which the organization is operating. An organization operating having one of its branches in Russia, Ukraine, while the war was going on, the risk goes much higher, right? And last is what are the different regulations that they abide by. These parameters are passed on to a function which gives the risk quantification, right? So if you look at the formula, it's the real cyber value at risk, which takes into consideration your cyber value at risk and also takes into consideration the mitigation efficiency as well. So if you look at, it's your expected loss per line of business minus your optimal security investment and the risk mitigation factor taken into account, right? These are calculated with respect to each of the line of businesses that are there, and it's a summation of that. It looks like a simple formula, but there are different internal things going on it as well, with different weightages and the data training models that we have come across, right? So if you look at the Gordon-Loeb security breach function, where the constant is taken as 0.65, which means the mitigation efficiency between 0 to 1 is 0.65, which means 65%, you can see over what has been the return of investments over a period of time, and with two different scenarios, right? You can also derive your net benefits on those investments. And I'm not just saying this based on hypothesis. There are real proven formula and mathematical simulations. Now questions, how is it done? Is it manual? What's the accuracy, right? These are stable pendulums. If we go back to our school days, we all have done this experiment of oscillating in a simple harmonic motion. So let's do a live simulation and bring all of this in sync, right? Because as I recently heard from someone, the devil is in the details. Okay, so if you look at this one, right, you would be able to understand what's your average quantified loss, low exposure loss, high exposure loss, and threat exposure loss. Now you would be able to get, with respect to the different line of businesses, what's the risk progression analysis over a period of time, right? And when you go here, you would be able to see different domain-wise analysis. I'm just waiting for the internet. It would give you different domain-wise analysis, which means your risk and governance, your policy controls, your endpoint controls, and all of that. Okay, not sure whether the internet is working or not. Okay, till it comes. Any questions on this till here? One of the questions that you might have is, how does this simulation actually work, right? Or how does this calculation actually work? What are the parameters taken into account? Anyone having that question, please raise your hand. Only one? Two? Okay. So while the customer onboards, right, we take a couple of inputs, and this is a particular raw script. It happens on the dashboard, but I'll kept this to explain it to you in detail, right? Because every time you see a particular metrics, you want to drill down on that, and that's the question kind of the management asks. So what's the name of the company? It's a public listed status. What are the different line of businesses? The revenue segments and revenue percentage by each segment. Industry, location, and workforce. If it's a public listed company, we generally get this data automatically by fetching it from the publicly available APIs. If not, well, these are the 7 questions that needs to be answered. Now, we have something, a report, which is known as the dynamic threat master, right? Now, the threat impact with respect to operational, the threat impact with respect to financial aspects, the threat impact with respect to risks, the threat success rate of that particular IOC or IOA or a CVE, what are the different types on that, and what are the location, sector, and size on which they have been active, right? We have open CTIs and different kind of sources through which we get this data. Now, once those things are fed in, this particular weightage, which varies from time to time with respect to a benchmarking framework, which is known as attack vector benchmarking, on different industries and all, through which this particular constant, which is used for calculation, dynamically moves over a period of time, right? Now, when that is done, a threat control efficiency is calculated with respect to the controls based on the SCF, which is the security control framework based on cyber maturity model, which has got more than 1,000 plus different controls. When your internal solutions are connected to the platform, we can actually know what has been the coverage of that. To what extent is the particular solution covering your exposures, both internally and externally. Based on that, a particular calculation is run to get your organization's threat control efficiency, which ranges from 0 to 1. And this is not something that's global, but it's specifically from different organizations. For this particular case, we have taken it as 0.5. Now moving ahead, it's a Python function to run a simulation, which would run it with respect to 1 lakh epochs, right? And when that is done, what you will get is a threat analysis. And you would get, with respect to a particular parameter, what has been your low exposure rate, medium exposure rate, and high exposure rate. Now, what does this actually mean? Low exposure rate, medium exposure rate, and high exposure rate, right? So, when we talk about cyber risk quantification, it's just not exactly a single number, it's a range, right? And how these things are derived is by looking at different kinds of data. Previous breach data, cyber insurance data, threat intel data, and all of that, right? In this particular scenario, where a bank with this size, with this kind of a revenue, with this kind of an exposure, this kind of an attack happened, this was the kind of risk that they possessed. Now, a question might come up, well, what about 0 days? Just a fun fact statistics, 99% of the breaches happen due to known vulnerabilities rather than unknown. Because, and simply misconfigurations, default passwords. We try to solve the complex problems and forget the simple. If we keep the basics right, we would be able to mitigate the complex problems as well. Now, once that is done, you would be able to get quantified business exposure to risks, which is our CRQ model, with respect to different threat functions as well. So if your organization faces a DDoS on this particular servers, on this particular systems, what's going to be the impact? Or if there's a phishing on this particular department, what's going to be the impact? Can they do a lateral movement for there? If I get in the marketing department, if I have already there in the system for a week, from there, can I do a lateral movement? Do I have a system in place which can stop that lateral movement? Do I have a system in place which can detect a 0 day, right? This kind of things are fed into the model which gives this particular result. Having said that, I see my time is up, but anyone having any particular questions, please feel free to ask. And one thing that you can do is read about Kuber more, which is quantified business exposure to risks. We named it Kuber because to give it an Indian touch, and made in India, made for the world kind of a feel, right? But can just Google about QBERCRQ and you will get details, more details about it, right? But having said that, at this moment, anyone having any questions, please feel free to ask.
You have shown the data scanning, right? I mean, it shows the report. So when we say so, first thing we assume that there will be some kind of agents which will be required or no?
No agent is required. So how it happens is the fourfold approach. First is the external world with respect to your organization, whatever data is available about your organization externally, right? You might have a brand monitoring system in place, we can just integrate, but the approach is a fourfold approach. So first is external world, next is internally, where we would come and integrate with the existing systems that you already have, right? Now, when I talk about systems, it's the security solutions that you have. We have got connectors for that, right? We have got 150 plus connectors in place,
Okay.
right? We have come across situations where an organization is using a solution, they have home built it, homegrown, for which we do not have an integration. it ideally takes us around 5 days time to build that connector.
So
Right?
maybe
Because
you were accessing from the logs or something from doing that? Is that
so we do not take the logs because that
Okay.
would kill us.
Exactly,
Right?
yeah.
We take specific metadatas from different segments of solution
Okay.
to collect and make an like single alias for that. I'll give you an example. Supposingly you are using an XDR and you are using a DLP solution. Both of their aliases in terms of naming conventions would be different,
Absolutely.
right, on a particular system.
correct?
And for the security team and for the CISO, it's a nightmare to make all those mappings.
Mapping, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Here, since we can understand those data, we create a single alias for you. So on a particular system, suppose you have a endpoint comparison matrix, fine, and you go and select a particular endpoint, you can see what are the systems that it is covering and all, right? Which actually gives us a privilege to make this entire system work without using any agent.
Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. Thank you.
So the third layer I forgot to mention, external, internal, then there's a layer of compliance and regulatory mandates where we cover more than 250 plus international standard frameworks and 50 plus regulatory mandates. All these three are done, then it goes on to this particular algorithm. Any more questions? Great. Thank you.